but just,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. One of my friends, she's doing more kids materials, and those are much more intensive, and she's making all these cards like all.
Can she make a we sing?
What?
Can she make a we sing?
We were thinking actually about doing a Guitar Hero, but with Byzantine notation and things like that. So, well, we didn't.
We should do a we sing kids
program.
Like for toddlers.
With like the little bouncy, or in we sing, what was it? Was there a bouncy ball with the words?
Well,
or?
I always have just like the tape and then the book with the music and then the words. And then I got 2 of them for my goddaughter, but I mean not with wax obviously, just that it has a CD and then the books.
She was thinking that like it with the there's a certain type of teaching where it's very much listening and listening and listening, and so she was asking me to do more like certain hymns in specific styles and certain levels, like do the really easy ones. So they'll listen to those for like 8 weeks, and they get those in their mind, and so then they're both learning orally as well as from the written notation. So
I learned better orally too.
So yeah, so that's we'll see what happens over time. I'll just explain what you have. So this Byzantine notations exercise, this thicker packet, this is only a portion of the actual packet. I'm still working on writing it out in English. It's all in Greek, and so I'm rewriting all these explanations because the explanations, there's not really very much in the Greek, so I'm writing them out. So this is kind of a self-sustained packet for anyone that's interested. We only got to 45 here exercises. The real one goes up to I think like 170 or something like that. I'll get there soon, maybe by the end of the summer. And so that's that. So this is from a specific packet by Chant and it seems to be the standard that everyone kind of starts off on. And if you go to ByzantineChant.org, this is up there along with the Greek one, and then the Greek one has little recordings attached to it in the PDF, and I've separated them. And so you hear this big Greek guy saying ni, ni, pa, and he just goes through all of them very slowly and deliberately. So they're there, and he also speaks in Greek and explains everything, which is not really helpful.
You speak Greek.
Yeah. Then this table of Byzantine notation symbols. This is also up on ByzantineChant.org. Everything here, except for one of the things I'll show you, is up there. This is the cheat sheet that I made for myself back in the day, and I've kind of amended it, and it's not complete, and maybe I will actually complete it at some point. But it has all the most of the ups and downs that you will ever need, and the scale that we'll go through and things like that.
Oh wait, the one's yours.
Yep. Hello, Galena. So,
My husband's out.
Oh, okay.
One there.
And Philip can be there. Since I have a lot of this material, I'm not going to take any new, but I'm going to look on with someone who's willing to share. Okay. I guess that's not you.
No, then you two can.
Well, yeah, I was going to say I was sitting there, and you two can sit together.
Okay, so then this table of Byzantine notation symbols, just the ups and the downs, and the has some rhythm in there as well, and the scale, and we'll go through all those just kind of very briefly. And all this again is way too advanced. This scale chart, just ignore this completely for most anything. It goes into deep theory and lots of numbers, and this is stuff that I love because I love the numerical parts of it. But it's very, I don't know, it's very complicated. So, and then this is primarily what we'll be working on today. These are a bunch of exercises, more designed by my one friend in Pittsburgh, more for teaching kids, but I found them to be very helpful. Whereas kids would get through like 1 page a day, we can get through probably this entire packet today.
Okay.
So I think it's tremendously helpful just for getting started. The exercise manual is very good, but it goes a little quick sometimes, and before you're really confident and set, it's already done with that symbol. So that's what you have, and I'll give out more things too.
Can I have a scale chart?
Oh, sure.
I don't think I have that one.
Okay,
thank you.
Sure. And all these again are up on ByzantineChant.org, which is essentially a website of the group that I was part of in Pittsburgh, but I'm the webmaster, so it's more of my website. So, so I kind of do what I want with it.
Really awesome.
So,
We are so privileged to have you.
glad to help out. So, I'm just going to go through a brief overview of Byzantine notation and Byzantine chant, how it happened, and then we'll start talking about more specifics of things. But Byzantine chant is two parts, and one being the melody, and one being the Isan. And this also could be called the Isoprathima. And these are, big words, but the Iso just means stay the same, like an isosceles triangle and all sorts of other things that have Iso. And this just means it's a drone. So you have a drone part underneath the music that kind of gives your foundation, and then you have your melody, which is kind of, floating above the Isan part of it. And traditionally, if you go way back in the day, there was just a melody. But at some point, adding the Isan in there, people don't know exactly when it developed, but at some point it happened. And so then the Isan kind of gives a more fullness. And what the Isan does is it kind of shows where the melody comes from and where it's going to go back to. The Isan is normally wherever you're starting from, and it just kind of holds there. And so it very much grounds everything and gives you a foundation. And our head chanter in Pittsburgh, he always like to say the melody is the unified voice of God, is the people when we say the creed together, when we say all these things, and the Isan is the uncreated light of God, unwavering, just as kind of a very fundamental basis to everything about this music. And there's a lot of theology in the notation and other things. I also like to think that this is more the angelic voices, and this is the earthly voices combined together. One's a little more mundane, one's a little more lofty. Both are there, but nevertheless, two parts. Every so often you find three parts.
Did you call the Isan unearthly?
Oh no, earthly. The melody being more angelic, and the Isan being more earthly, like just grounded and rooted in something constant, and not flying around or floating or bodiless. So that's those two parts. And in general, the melody is the more important part, and you always, at least in traditional schools, like a 5-year school for Byzantine music, you would do melody for 4 years, and the final year you would learn Isan. Isan, while it is a drone, in general people consider it to be the more difficult part because you're kind of guiding where the melody's going to go by what you do, and it just ends up being a more difficult part to really hold that down. And there's normally fewer Isan people. But yeah, so these are the two parts, and there's one or two instances when you'll sing in three parts, maybe in Greece and other places, but we'll just kind of ignore them for the moment because they're very scattered. But two parts in contrast to Western music, which is normally 4 parts. And then I'm going to contrast a lot more with Western music as to how it's different. So you have the melody and you have the Isan, and the interesting part is that when in Western music what you have is you have an absolute note. You have 5 lines, and then, assuming this is a treble clef, if I put that there, you know what note that is. That's just, you're going to sing that note, and that's what note it's going to be. If I write this one, you're going to go from here to here. But there's still a middleman. You have to think, okay, this is a G, this is a B. How much do I jump? I know I'm going to jump up 2 notes because it's from a G to a B, so you're jumping up a major third. Byzantine notation doesn't do that. It could care less where you are and where you're going to go. It just tells you to jump up 2 notes. It tells you to jump up 3 notes. It tells you to go a certain distance. It doesn't tell you where you are or where you're going to go. It just assumes orally or auditorily that you know where you are and where you're going to go. So it presupposes a certain ear of the person and a certain ability that you're familiar, at least with the scale that you're singing in. So because of that, everything is symbolic, and so then what you end up having is you have a symbol like this, and this one, we'll get into this. This means stay the same, and then this one means go up 1, and so that essentially what you can recognize, instead of these individual notes, you start to begin to recognize patterns because it is symbolic. And so that's where you get into a little bit more of a sight reading purpose. With Western music, oftentimes you can't really, you're reading as you go. With this, you end up it's very much like a language. So you're not reading individual notes. You start by reading letters, then you read words, then you read phrases, then you can kind of almost sight read at a very quick glance. just because you start recognizing these symbolic patterns. And that only works because they're symbols, and that your eye can notice, oh, this group, I recognize this group, because you see that all the time. And that's how most Byzantine music is composed, is by all these formulas, these patterns that repeat throughout the music. So it ends up becoming very easy, while initially it's very contrasting to Western music. Because it's symbolic, there's a different way of reading it as well. There's no vertical component to it because it's just one note. So in Western music, you oftentimes have a verticality to it. You can look at the harmony, you can look at all these things. With Byzantine chant and Byzantine notation, there's no vertical component to it. It's all horizontal, and that kind of shows you that we're looking completely about the line of music, and everything is based on the words entirely. So with Western music, there's a certain amount of interest between, how are the different parts interweaving. In this case, it's not that way at all. The words are foremost and the paramount part of it. And if the melody ever gets in the way of the words, that's a problem. And that, in fact, the melody, its major goal is to kind of coat the ear. It's kind of like a little honey with medicine or sugar with medicine, to make it a little bit easier to swallow these deep theological things that we're hearing. And so the melody is just there to word paint. It's just there that if you get distracted, you can, sometimes you can get lost in the music, but also just if you get distracted, sometimes when you hear the melody change, it might fall, and then oh, we're talking about, falling into sin, or we just talked about Hades, or we talked about this, and it brings you right back. So there's these little key things that with the word painting, even if you can't understand what's going on, you can still get into that nuance because of how the melody paints things. So it's very much horizontal, very linear. This actually makes it tremendously easy to sight read because you're reading one symbol at a time as opposed to 5 lines and trying to figure out where it is with the words beneath it. So in Pittsburgh, when I was there, we've sight read 40 pages of music, like for Theophany. Never read it before, and we were not exhausted at the end of the night. If I did that with Western music, we could do it, but at the end of the night, we'd want, I don't know, a glass of scotch or something. Something just to get us off our nerves, because it would just be like intensely focused the entire time. Any questions before I go on? Okay, so we'll get in.
You said that means stay the same, so both of those together, or the first one?
I'll get there. Do you mind if I hold it, or?
No, that's fine. I just wrote something.
This means stay the same, and this means go up one.
Go up one.
But before I get there,
okay.
I'll talk about how to know where to start and where to go, and things like that. But because these are symbols, it kind of begs the question: how did we get symbols in the first place? And this predates Western music, so somehow this all came to be. And in general, in the early church, everything was very much psalm-based, and a lot of the hymns were very much simple. And then there was this call and response, and that someone would call out something, and everyone would kind of join in, and you'd sing together. And they were very much simple melodies that people would do. At some point, someone decided, well, I want to tell someone else what I'm going to do, like the leader, because they would always have some leader to bring things. So they would give little hand symbols, So there's a little symbol that looks like this, which kind of looks like a hand, kind of curved over. So, and then you also have one that's like this, which might be something like this, And in fact, some of these do retain the Greek name that means, claw, and things like that, and other little terms that would come from hand symbols. So in fact, somebody in the front will kind of be signaling to people, saying, this is kind of what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this now. And those sometimes meant more and sometimes meant less, in terms of a phrase. So eventually what people ended up doing was that you had, eventually when we had written words, then you have the written words there. And the same thing, as like in the Jewish tradition, what they used to do is they would put little dots and things like that above it to tell you, okay, I'm going to go up like that and then do this. And they kind of ornament the music to tell you how you're going to sing it. And the same thing with Byzantine music, that, eventually like these kind of became, these little squiggles, eventually became this line of music and this line of symbols combined with those hand symbols above the words. And so you have this linear progression of symbols above the linear progression of words.
I have a question. Is it always left to right? So if you're chanting in Arabic, would it be backwards?
So that's a fun thing. So in general, yeah, it's left to right. And the way that it works, and I'll show you what it means. So, and I'll just write stuff that you don't know. So if I were to write this, this is just our starting symbol, and this says, stay the same, up one, up one. So this, if I were to write this, okay, the word is educate, right? So educate. So in Arabic, the way that it works, and recently there's been a push by St. Anthony's Monastery. I'm not sure how much they're pushing. Hello, Candace. We have a chair over there. And so recently at St. Anthony's Monastery.com, they've made an attempt to write. So the way people normally write this music now is with a word file. And what they've done is they made an Arabic version of it, which goes backwards. I don't know of any Syrians, Lebanese, anyone that actually uses this, and all their music is written backwards. And I'll show you what that means in a second. And from talking to them, it's tremendously difficult to read. And such that the one, she's been reading it all her life, and she will not sight read a piece. Like, just if you just give her a piece, she will not sight read it. Like, she has to sit down and look at it first, just because it's not straightforward like that. And the major reason is because instead of doing something like this, what they do okay. So from an English standpoint, we have no idea what this word is until you get finally to the end and you're like, educate. And so they said it's a tremendous headache to read this, and that it really is tremendously difficult. So that if you have the words memorized and you know where you're going, then it works out fine. But if you have no idea, you're essentially reading syllable by syllable, and sometimes that makes phrasing issues, and you cut off in the middle of the word and
This
you don't.
This is the Arabic. If somebody has an Arabic notated chant in Arabic.
Yeah, and like I said, St. Anthony's Monastery has kind of tried to do something like this.
Do it backwards so it would.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if they reverse the symbols or what they do, but no one, at least none of the, most people that I talk to kind of laugh about that. There's also a Braille system that's been devised by a blind monk, and then St. Anthony's Monastery has also tried to work with that, but Father Dositheos, he's said it's this whole complicated system of dots for both the words and the melody. It's I don't even know how they would read it.
So like a Braille version of. Interesting.
Yeah. So there are other things, but Arabic is specifically one that's very complicated to read. So, but yeah. So eventually you get these little symbols above the words, and that's where you get this whole symbolic pattern, all stemming from the little hand symbols, eventually being written down with little jots and tittles above the words, and then eventually kind of codifying itself. And then you come to the middle of the 19th century. And then people said, this is way too complicated. We have way too many symbols. They mean way too much. This symbol means a whole slew of things. This one means a whole slew of things. So there was a reform inside of the Byzantine world. Some people didn't like it, so as reforms go. So they essentially reformed the notation, which changed it such that 25 years worth of practice made you a master. After the reform, 5 years of practice and like a degree made you a master. So 25 to 5 was a much better progression. You didn't have to invest all of your life and then finally realize I didn't make it, So 5 years was much more doable, and it makes classes like this a lot more doable. And that's called the old notation. This is the new notation. And in general, you see some holdovers from the old notation that people do write other symbols, and there's controversy because no one really knows what those old symbols mean because it's a historical thing, and people are looking back and saying, given this and this and this, therefore I make this correlation. We don't have any recording. We have no idea what it was. There's some guesswork in there, so it becomes a problem.
So you think the chant has changed over the years?
Yes. Now, certain things have changed less than other things. So certain things that are a little bit more simple melodies and common melodies, oral traditions kind of preserve them throughout the centuries. I wouldn't say that they were exactly the same. Let's say Saint Romanos the Melodist, like he wrote certain things. I wouldn't say that the way that we sing them now is exactly the same way, but certain things would be very similar. And you can argue either way on that, but some people, like especially ethnomusicologists and other people, will say, given this progression and looking back at music manuscripts from certain times and how people have illuminated those manuscripts later on, and there's some sort of progression, you can kind of say, oh, they did kind of retain what we sing now, but it wouldn't be the same thing. So pretty close, at least. It's at least the oldest organic musical development in the world. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean that it's the same because it organically develops.
Right.
But it is what it is. And then, because all of this isn't complicated enough, what they wanted to do is separate it into, essentially codify it into specific genres of music. So in addition to this notational system, you end up having a set of tones or a set of modes. And this tells you, kind of has a certain quality of music. So you have 8 tones, technically you have 4 tones, and you have what are called 4 authentic tones, and this doesn't matter so much for our current purposes, but you have 4 authentic tones and 4 plagal tones. And plagal is just a word which means on its side, essentially. So it's kind of like, tone 1, and then if you have plagal 1, it's kind of like tone 1 in Bizarro World. It's kind of on its side. You can see the familiarity and you can see the similarity, but they're not the same thing, and they are distinct things. But nevertheless, there is a relationship between them. And then you have tone 2, plagal 2, tone 3. Then you have grave mode, and grave mode because there's a seriousness, but it's also the lowest note, so it's kind of this heaviness. And we'll go into that at some point later. But this is just a quick overview of these guys. And then tone 4, plagal 4. St. John of Damascus, I believe, started with the first 4, and then at some point the 4 plagals came into it over time. So, but in case you look at a piece of music and it says plagal of the 4th mode, in the Russian system they just went to 1 through 8. The Byzantine system is 1 through 4, plagal 1 through plagal 4. So.
You said St. John of Damascus is the one who came up with the tones?
He wrote the book of the 8 tones. He was the initial guy who kind of wrote all that. He was a rather prolific guy. And so he wrote a lot of them, and then people after him completed it. Well, not that he was undone, but they thought there should be more. So then they wrote more. And so at least the 4 tones, I believe, can be accredited kind of to him codifying those. Not that they didn't exist before. It's kind of like the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. It's not that it didn't exist before John Chrysostom, it's just that he kind of set it down and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So, yeah, kind of that same type of thing. So, any questions before I get a little more specific? All right.
We should have icons of all the Byzantine chant people in the middle.
Romanos and Cosmas and all those guys. So, because this is all symbolic, we need to know where we're going, where we're starting, and where we're ending, type of thing. So there's a way to do this, and this is where we get into a little bit of Greek terminology, and we'll use the Greek terminology for now because there's no better English words for it, and also it's kind of like if you're learning Western music, you learn Italian words. If you're learning, other things, sometimes you learn German words, sometimes you learn this and that. The same thing with this, it's a musical system from a different area. This is not our system, so that is what it is. And so then what they did with this reform, they decided that the Westerners had a good idea of this do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do thing that we have from The Sound of Music. And so they took that and they were like, that's pretty good. And then they also liked the fact that the Americans did, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So they took their Greek alphabet and they did alpha, beta, gamma, delta. And they said, well, alpha is not a syllable. So they put another letter in front of it. And they essentially made their own set of syllables. Instead of, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, they made their own set of symbols. So what they came up with, and this is in that little cheat sheet packet, and I'll try and keep the Greek symbols to a minimum. But if you ever taken physics, they should at least be familiar. But essentially, it's if you start with alpha, then you get this one's pa, and then beta, gives you vu, and then ga, and then v, and it's kind of like Thee, but that's too many letters, and then ke, and then zo, and then mi. Okay, so
You have them backwards in your cheat sheet.
I'm getting them. Yeah. So, So the Pavugali Kezoni. So this is, this ascending. This is actually the way that I used to write them. And then somebody said, why would you put ascending if you're going down? So then I changed the cheat sheet because some people didn't like that. So I'll rewrite it in a second. So Pavugali Kezoni, and we'll go through that in a second. But Pa wasn't really where a lot of the tones ended up starting on Ni. So instead of starting on Pa, they put Ni there. And so you have Ni to Ni. And then because there's a discrepancy, how do you differentiate between that Ni and that Ni? They put an apostrophe by the upper one. So no apostrophe means regular. Apostrophe means the octave above it, 7 notes above it. And then if you have 2 apostrophes, it means even the next one above that. And if it's lowercase, then it's the one below, an octave below. So 7 notes below. So because of that, Zo also gets an apostrophe because this Zo is oftentimes used. So this becomes regular Zo because it is used as the basis note of one of the tones. And then Ni because it's also the basis note. Pa because it's also the basis note. Ga, Vu, and then Ga. They're all basis notes as well as Ni. So these two get little apostrophes. And now the question is, what is the separation between Ni and Pa and Vu? Because this is a non-Western scale set. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sing Western scales. We could care less for the moment. And so Ni Pa would be like a C D, So this would be Ni Pa Vu Ga Ni. The real intervals are not that way. So in the real intervals, there's 4 different general scales that you would sing. We'll ignore them for the moment. But some of them are more different than others from the Western mindset. And I'll just write them here. One of them is diatonic, the diatonic scale, which is mainly what we'll be working in. Then you have hard chromatic scale and a soft chromatic scale, which used to be the same thing, but history separated. And then you have the enharmonic. Probably not because it's in the scale chart, but I'm not going to talk on them at all, but just so you know, there's 4 scales. And each scale defines how big is the separation between Ni and Pa, how big is the separation between Pa and Vu, and all those things. So Ni and Pa will not always be the same distance apart. Just that's just how it is.
Depending on what scale you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you'll know that, and for the most part, ignore all these for the moment, and we'll just work in the diatonic. And we're not even going to work in the diatonic because the diatonic would be something instead of Ni Pa Vu, it'd be something more like Ni Pa Vu.
Okay.
Slightly pulled down. I could care less. So we'll just work in a Western scale, Western major scale, which is what everyone knows. So I'm going to write these on the tops for our knowledge, and then we'll get looking at a little bit more fundamental things. Any questions there?
You kind of confused me with the Ni apostrophe
Okay.
something else thing. Are you gonna
So
clarify that in the future?
So it's like Ni.
So it's an octave apart if you haven't.
Yeah.
And then okay, and then that one's an octave below.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And why does the Zo have the apostrophe?
Because with what happened with all those tones that I was talking about, what they did at some point was they said, to simplify things, we're gonna do something interesting. So we're gonna start. Tone 1 will be here. Tone 2 will be here. Tone 3 will be here. Tone 4 will be here. Tone plagal 1 will be here. And then and then plagal 2 would be here. Plagal 3, which is actually grade mode, and then plagal 4. Okay, that type of thing, just going down and then going back up.
So you can basically pick a note and from your head, and then you pick your Ni.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything is based upon where your voice is. So Ni, that's a good Ni.
Get it.
Yeah.
See, when Rita Romanos is doing his thing, I'm like,
Yep. Yeah, so it's there's no at some point people wanted to say this is 376 hertz. That's just where Ni is. No, that didn't catch on very well because then if I'm singing a certain thing, it doesn't work out so well for me. So you pitch it wherever it's comfortable. So because of the way that these things went, and this is getting to finish your question, was that this was a big component of a tone. This is a big component of a tone. This, and so as well become a big component of that tone. Essentially, the starting note, the basis note, how it's founded, and where it always goes away from it, but always returns back to that note. So because it was such an important note of that tone, that became normal. Mm-hmm. So that just became a regular zo because it was just used as part of one of the tones.
Alright.
So then this one gets demoted, or promoted. Yeah, either way.
And then, did you say that you can't, like, in life, they only use the Western scale, or just we use the Western scale?
We're going to use the Western scale.
But you could go somewhere else, and they're like, no, we want this in harmonic scale. And
well, we'll get there eventually.
Oh.
Yeah,
and so
that's just for our initial purposes, because I'm not going to, it's difficult to not only teach you a new language, which is Byzantine music to me is a language, because more and more you get familiar with phrases and everything. So it's a new language, but then I'm also going to retrain your ear and retrain your voice. Because when I used to listen to things, now that I listen to them, after listening to them over and over again, now I'm like, wait a minute, they were singing this correctly. When I was younger, 5 years ago or something like that, I didn't even notice that they were singing it differently. My ear just put it where it wanted to put it. It put it into its little categorical box and said, okay, you're going to fit here because that's where it tells you to fit. So, for me to do that initially would be kind of, I don't know, preposterous. So I won't do that to you. So, but I think the varsity team, as they like to call themselves, and as I sometimes call them, the intermediates, they're starting to get little bits of it. And as I get better and better at doing them myself, it takes a good while. But if you listen to a good chanter, especially one that has a 5-year degree and is trained, especially overseas, because we don't really have a program over here very well established, and they've got it. Sometimes it sounds really weird because you're like, that's just wrong. Normally it's not. So.
Now, are we gonna say the obvious, or we're the knights who say me?
Well, it's funny. I've gotten that, and at some point we were going ni pa vu pa ni ni, and one of my friends was like panini. Oh man, so yeah, there's lots of things. So we'll sing the scale in a second, and then we'll look at actually how music works. So, and throughout this, I'll bring, maybe next week I'll bring some actual little helper things that I think are fun, but it's kind of hard to do in a group. It's good with like one-on-one or with kids. With a big group, we'll see how it works. So let's just sing it from knee up to high knee, and just on a Western major scale. So maybe
Sorry.
Yep. Sure. Yeah.
What is the difference between the Greek letter and the Greek name?
I'll answer that in a second.
Okay.
So, and you're right in alignment with my thought process. I like it. So it's me. So just me pa vu ga ni te sol mi ni sol ke di fa vu pa ni. Nice. Cool. So, to your question, it comes at, in general, this is great that we have this scale, but now we need to know where to start and where to go. So at the beginning of a piece of music, they would write down one of these notes, and they would tell you, okay, this hymn starts on E. That's not always the case, but there's always some sort of marker for the tone, some marker for your scale. And so what these markers are called are Marquee Dia Markers. And so your Marquee Dia, your martyrs, a martyr is a witness, and a witness kind of gives of his life to bear witness to something else, something outside of himself. So as we are called to be martyrs towards Christ, and everything about us is supposed to point towards Christ, the martyrs, their job is to submit their life to the melody. Everything they do is to point towards the melody and where you are. So these Marquee Dia tell you where you begin and where you are in the music, and if you're not there, get there. And at the end, where you should have ended up, if you're doing it right. So you have different types of Marquee Dia throughout the music, all these little tone markers. And so these guys, essentially one begins the music. And I'll explain this in a second. This tells you where to start. And then if I write something, this one tells you where you should have finished up.
Mhm.
This one, you don't sing this. This has no quality. It's just an appropriate place to breathe, an appropriate place to realize, oh, I'm wrong, or I'm right, or that, and then you would keep going with music. But normally they're not in the middle of a word, because that wouldn't make sense. And normally they're at an appropriate place to breathe. And these are lowercase stylized Greek letters. I haven't really seen anyone use Latin characters yet. I've been wondering if it's possible to like put, an N there instead, and then put like a B over here. I haven't seen that very much. The Romanian music might use it, but I haven't really seen it. So at the moment we'll use those, but they're on the scale chart, and most of the time for the moment I'll tell you what they are, so that you don't have to think about it, and then eventually it'll kind of become second knowledge.
When they use it, it's the ESON.
Yeah. So, and just to let you know, with the ESON, so sometimes the uppercase Greek letters, they would be written above the music, and that would tell you what your ESON is. So this is your melody, your words are right beneath it, and then if I were to write, let's say, ni,
That's the ESON.
that's the ESON. So I would tell you ni, and everyone else would go ni, fa, woo. But the ESON would just say ni the entire time on the words or not on the words.
I've
Either
been
one.
making up the ESON.
That's okay. Well, sometimes it's written, sometimes it's not written, and then it requires you to know something and to know where the melody's going. If it's written, it's
But in
helpful.
that case, I'm not the one who's like making the flow of the music. I'm
Mhm.
just the melody's going, and I'm just like, okay, where am I gonna put it?
Right, but if you end up changing, like we've had it before, if I'm improvising a melody because we don't have the music, and I do something, and then the ESON might anticipate that I'm going to do this, so then they go up to a certain note, and I'm like, no, go back down, I'm not there yet.
I see.
So that's where it gets. Oftentimes it's written in parentheses, sometimes it's not, and sometimes you'll see it where it has the second letter as well. So this would be, but that would be written above the music, and we'll just kind of, it's there for the moment. And then you would keep holding that until you see something that tells you to change otherwise. Okay, so these guys are at the beginning and the middle. So like this is your, if you have the uppercase letter nu, you have the lowercase letter nu. If you have the uppercase letter pi, then you have the lowercase letter pi. So these are your little Marquee Dia, then beta, or beta as the new one. They kind of look the same, except this one is stylized. So this one almost looks like an American D, and then.
You don't have the capital one for beta on here. Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't give it a tail.
Mm-hmm.
It looks different because you don't.
Oh, they do like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's not on it.
And then you have capital gamma and then lowercase gamma. They kind of look the same.
Do we need to know what they're called?
Not necessarily.
Like gamma and
No,
all that
no.
stuff? Okay.
No. Eventually, like this will just be ni, vu, ga, li. That's the only uppercase one.
So the symbols we'll call
So-
by are those Greek, are these,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, by the Greek names.
Yeah. Yep. So that, and as I said, initially you can just kind of ignore this because I'll tell you what it is, but over time you'll get used to like this guy comes around a lot, so then you'll get used to what he looks like.
You mean me?
Yeah. Well, this whole symbol combination too.
You haven't taught us the bottom part yet, have you?
Nope. And I'm going to talk on it very briefly because that would get way too complicated. This tells you what your scale is. This kind of tells you your local environment around that. So how close are the notes around it? So if Steve and I are like here and I'm ni and he's pa, I would have a certain symbol beneath me that would say, okay, I'm a certain distance from Steve, and I'm a certain distance from the wall. So this symbol just tells you your local environment and what is your distance from your nearest neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll leave it at that. So, okay. So, as we said, we start with something, we have something in the middle, a little witness to the music that tells us where we should be, and then we read from left to right, and then if we're ascending, if we have an ascending symbol, we read bottom up. If we have a descending symbol, we read bottom down, or top down. So that's kind of the general rules for things, is left to right, bottom up if you're ascending, top down if you're
I don't know what
descending.
you mean by that.
We'll get there eventually.
Okay,
But
thanks.
it's like if I were to write this is actually two symbols. So you would read this one first, then this one, in a vertical fashion.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll get there. So, okay, and then the only other thing before we start actually looking at things is that there's rhythm, and rhythm is really weird, so we'll get to that later, much later. But this is pretty straightforward once we actually read some music. And there's only 10 symbols that you need to know. And then it's up to you as to how you proceed. Is either the way that I initially learned everything was just memorize. So every individual symbol is its own. Or you can do what I learned later, which is, okay, I have 10 symbols, everything else is a mathematical combination. 2 plus 1 is 3. So if you see a symbol that means up 2 and you see a symbol that means up 1, you add them together and you get up 3. And so some people really like to just do the math. The intermediate class, I think Jeff really liked to do math because he's a mathematician. And then John kind of liked it, he understood it, and then Patricia was like, I could care less, at least if I recall. And so she just wanted to memorize. And so I've done both. Both are adequate, both work. And most of the time you wouldn't fall into a trap. Very randomly would you see a really big jump and have to use math to actually figure it out that you wouldn't have memorized. So, and all the ones that you would need to memorize are in that little packet. But again, only 10 symbols, and we'll work through them systematically. Okay. So, any questions before I get going on actual music and actually
If we're
reading
gonna
things?
do the actual music, I'll take a little packet.
Okay, sure.
And I'll give it back.
Yep. No problem. Even if you don't give it back, it's still okay. So, and there are music books out there about this. Some of them are more expensive than others, and if you want to see them, I have them. I look at them because that's what I do, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. I'm trying to write my own textbook from a practical standpoint as opposed to a theory standpoint, so you could, from an American side, look and be like, I want to learn this, and there's no teacher, because in general, throughout America, everyone always tells me, well, how do you learn? You go and find an accomplished teacher and learn from him. And then my question is then, 1, where do I find them? And 2, is it going to be in English? And normally the answer is no and no. So that kind of begs, some sort of practical guide, especially for a Western mindset and musician. So the first thing I'll say, this is a symbol. It kind of looks like a sideways candy cane, and he's called Isan. And as we saw, the Isan is the drone, and so this symbol just means stay the same. Don't go anywhere. Wherever you started, don't go anywhere. So do nothing. So if I write, ni, and then I see this symbol, the next one is going to be ni. So this would just be ni. You just do the same thing as was previously done. Okay? Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, neat. All right, let's read some music. So, this little packet here, this guy, and I'll bring it up on my computer so that I can read through it myself. Let's see. All right. So if you look at this, that's not the right one. What we start with is the Greek letter for ni, and then we go from there. And where do we end?
On the same note.
Yeah, we end on ni, and so it's kind of simple. So we'll read through that once I get it up on my screen here. All right.
So we're all going to be singing different notes because our voices are all different.
Well, no. I'll give you ni. So.
The protosaltis gets to decide.
The who?
Protosaltis, the first among the saltis. These are protosaltis.
The first chanter. Proto meaning first, and then
Like
saltis. Yeah, and psalter, saltis, the psalm singer. Okay, so exercise 1-1. So this one just has a whole bunch of Isans, and so we start on ni, we end on ni. So if that's our ni, each one of these is one beat. So I'll just kind of give 1, 2. So 1, 2, ni, 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 ni. Very nice. I hope that was simple. So we didn't really do very much. And we'll eventually get into a little bit more about rhythm, but at the moment everything is one beat. So when in doubt, it's just ni, ni. Exercise 1-2, we have a whole string of Isans, all those will stay the same guys, and we have a 1 at the end, which is different, right? And then our symbol at the end is pa. Okay. So, any guesses at what that symbol means?
It's up one.
Up one. Okay. So, we would sing this ni 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 pa, and we would just go around. And eventually, once these start to get more complicated, I've recommended that people sometimes, like, to get yourself used to these note names, you can kind of write in the note names underneath them, because it's more important for me that you learn how to read the notation and the memorization of the note names is important and will come with time. So sometimes, you might need to do a little work ahead of time and write in ni pa vu. That way, you've done your thinking ahead of time and you can just read the actual music. But the note names are tremendously important because I've taught people without them, and then years later I'm like, oh no, I've forgotten. They're missing a complete foundation that I didn't realize they were missing, and that was on me. And I thought it would be simpler, and they were able to read so much more music so much more quickly, but they were really missing a key fundamental. So the note names are tremendously important, and the saying in Greek is 1,000 times on note names and 1 time on melody. So that's how important they are, is that you do it 1,000 times with these practice syllables, called paralagi, just the syllables, and then 1 time with the actual melody, the words. So the next one, 1, 2, is ni and pa. So let's sing it. 1, 2, ni, 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 pa. All right, number 3. Ni, 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 pa, pa. Number 4. Ni, ni, pa, 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 pa. Very nice. Number 5. Ni, pa, 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 pa. Well done. All right, number 6. We know the beginning, and then we get another symbol. Okay, so this symbol, any guesses? We go from ni, we end on ni, and so we have ni, ni, pa, pa, pa.
They go back down one.
Yeah, we go back down one. So let's go down. And so before we talk about, before we sing it, I'll just give you the name. And this is only something for me to know at the moment, because in order for me to write things online or to talk intelligently to people, I need to know what these are called. So this is just called oligon. Oligon. And so this means up one. And then the other one almost looks like an apostrophe, and he's called apostrophos. So, and he needs that one. So, and I'm working on a set of flashcards that may be helpful for people, and I'll show you them at the end, but to see what your thoughts are. But whole sorts of things are in the works, and if only I had a full-time job that was this instead of doing research. So, number 6. So we go up one and then we go down one. So if that's our ni, 1, 2, ni, ni, pa, 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 ni. Next one, number 7. Ni, ni, pa, pa, ni, ni. All right. Number 8. Ni, pa, 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 ni, ni. Number 9. Ni, pa, ni, 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 ni. All right, number 10. Getting tricky. Ni, pa, ni, pa, ni, ni, ni. No problem. All right, so number 11, I guess it's a little more tricky. So nothing new in terms of symbols, right? Okay, so we have stay the same, up one, stay the same, stay the same, stay the same, up one, which brings us to our next little Marquee Dia, next little witness, which is the vu, our vu symbol, our little B. So that's just ni pa 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 vu. So and if you forget what the symbols are, you can always take the cheat sheet and put it out and remind yourself. So cheating is allowed completely in this class. So number 11. So ni pa 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 on ni. We end on ni. All right, number 13. Ni pa pa vu vu pa ni. Nice. Any questions there? Make sense? Number 14. Ni pa vu vu pa ni. Nice. Number 15. Mi pa vu pa ni.
Now I'm having trouble remembering what the words are, so I'm like, I don't know what to do.
That's where hopefully I come in. If I mess up, you can I don't know, smack me or I don't know, do something. So I shouldn't mess up. At least that's not my intention. So you can rely on me, and I'm gonna kind of push through because it's really easy to just sing these on la. But I think the ni pa vus are.
Totally
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm starting to not be able to remember.
So yeah. So number 16, and it's to be understood because this is new stuff completely. So 16, we have another symbol. Okay. So we start on ga, or we start on ni, and we end on ga. There's our fourth note up there. So we have stay the same, up one, blank, stay the same. So we have ni pa vu. So that must be ga.
I'm learning the names that bad.
I know, that's perfectly fine. So it's ni pa vu, and then we have ga, and it has another up one. And this is where things get a little funny, helpful for the purpose of sight reading. There's multiple ways. There's 3 different ways to go up one. So today, at least we're going to learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the symbols. So by the end of the day, you'll have half the symbols done. Easy enough. So another way to go up is this guy. He's called Kendima-san. And that just means plural because one of these is a kendima, so kendimata is 2 of them, or multiple. And he also means up one. But the difference here, this is a regular up one. This is a slurred up one. He's connected to the previous syllable, so he never gets a new word. He's always connected. So if I were to write, do you mind if I was all this? If I were to write something like this, let's say we start on ni, and then we have ni pa, okay, as opposed to this. This is ni pa, this is ni pa. However, this is ni pa, but it's la la. This is la. Kind of them together. So this is elided together. They're just connected, slurred together, and these would be individuals. Yeah, and that's the other thing is that this symbol, because he's always slurred, he's always unstressed, and so that he's always normally he's on the upbeat. So if you have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, so the 2 is always your kendimata because he is unstressed. So it's 1, 2, and he gets the upbeat there. So he's an unstressed little guy. And then there's another one which we'll learn in a brief moment, which is the opposite of unstressed, being stressed. Okay, so if we look at 16, we'll read it once with the note names. So this is just ni pa vu ga, and then we'll read it with la, and we'll do a bunch of these on la just to show the difference. So 16, 1, 2, ni pa vu ga ga. And when you're doing with the note names, you always re-articulate, irrespective of whatever the symbol is. Let's do it with la now. So 16, same thing, but just connecting the 2 penultimate notes. So la 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 la. Make sense? All right, and this helps with, again, I mentioned the pattern recognition. Because there's multiple ways of writing things, now you start to recognize patterns. Because certain symbols will only be used in certain patterns. So there's a certain predictability to each use of the symbols, and so there's a reason for it. There's a method behind this madness. So number 17. So ni pa vu, and we'll sing with ni pa vu, and then we'll sing it with la. So ni pa vu vu. Let's do it on la. La la la. Very nice. Number 18. Let's just do this one on la. So la 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 la. Ni pa pa vu vu. So one more time. La la la. Nice. Number 19. Let's do it on ni pa vu. So ni pa pa vu vu pa ni. Cool. Let's do that la one more time. La 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 la. Any questions? Number 20. So let's do this ni pa vu. Ni pa pa ni pa pa. And I sing it with la. La 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 la. All right. Any questions? Okay. So we're gonna do just a few more, and then we'll be done for the day. Yeah. And so the next one, number 21. We know everything here, right? So it's stay the same. Up one, up one, up one. Stay the same, stay the same. And so this is ni pa vu ga. Ni pa vu ga ga ga. And so then we have our little symbol ga again.
What is Lady Gaga doing?
This is progressive music, you know. we knew about her from before the ages. So before we do number 21, let's contrast it with 22. So we have ni pa vu ga blank, and then we have a down one, and we still end on ga. So we have another new symbol. Any thoughts on what that means?
Well, let's see here.
Up one note, stressed. With a plus.
Yes. All right, so context clues or just the cheat sheet is good. So this little guy is called, you know, if you think about it, you could kind of like make a little hand symbol pointing upwards as the way it was. So this guy is katasti, and he means up one, just like the other guys that we learned, except he's stressed. So what this means is that what you'll do in the music is that he's on the stressed part of a word. So if it's like receive the body of Christ, it might be receive the body, that type of thing. And he just gets that accent, just as again as an additional way of sight reading, so that now you know. You don't even have to think about the words a little bit because you see him and you know it's going to be a stressed syllable. So that's an added aspect that's taken away from your mental comprehension or your mental capacity. So he's stressed, but he also is fluttered if there is time. And this is one of those things that sometimes when I used to sing music, especially in Pittsburgh, people were like, there's chanters up there fluttering everywhere, doing whatever they want. The music, normally we didn't do whatever we wanted. The music told us specifically what it wanted us to do. So this is, like if I were to go on ga, so ga, this one would be ga, that's just your little ni pa vu ga di ga di, just a little, from this note to the note above it and back down, just a little brief ga. So I don't know if anyone wants to flutter with me on that note, just ah, everybody together, ah, and in the midst of the music, if there is time, an appropriate thing to do is to flutter. If there is no time, because if you're not like Greek or Arab and have all these vocal inflections, I can't do it all the time. So then you just stress it. You just go ni pa vu ga di ga, because there's no time there. You go di, it's just too small. So It's fluttered if you have time. Some people teach this and they just say up one, up one, up one for all three of those symbols. I like to at least introduce why they're different and why there's a reason. And to finish out with this guy, there's one added aspect of him, is that he will always go down after him. So you'll always see something like that. After him, you always go down. So that's an added sight reading thing, is that after this symbol, you know what's coming next. You know you're going to go down 1, 2, 3, something, but it's always going to be down. There may be a mistake in this piece of music, I'm not sure. There's a mistake in one of the Greek Archdiocese books that they by the Byzantine Music School. I don't know how they made a mistake in their own book. But yeah, so there are mistakes, and I didn't write this set of scales here, so hopefully I think they're all correct here, at least on this page. So after the symbol, you always go down. So that's an added sight reading bonus. All right, so we'll go through this page and then we'll be done. So 21. Ni pa vu ga. Ni pa vu ga ga ga. All right, number 22. We'll do it a little bit slower so we can flutter, if you so desire. Otherwise, just hit it hard. It says ni pa vu ga vi ga. Just give it some sort of emphasis. So ni pa vu ga vi ga. That's a vi ga. And I had a friend in Pittsburgh, and he really got overexcited. And he was like vi. It's like no, just small, just a small flutter.
So DHI is V?
The?
Yeah.
Like the book.
Yeah. So the problem there is that some people wrote a THI, which to me is the, which doesn't make sense, and then some people wrote a THEE, which is an actual word, which then gets people confused, and it's also four letters, which is kind of long. So I picked the because D has a different placement than T, so it's the. It has the quality of a D, but with C. I don't know. It makes sense in my mind. If it doesn't make sense in your mind, please let me know.
So the is
The.
Delta.
Yeah, delta.
Like all these years when you've been doing Ispolite, Eti, it's really despota,
Despota.
not despota.
I should have been.
Yeah.
I've only been Malachite 6 years.
Okay. Yeah, but
So when the bishop comes, I'm like, what are we supposed to say?
well, it's like the. Do we magnify the? Same thing, same pronunciation.
Okay.
So 23.
23.
So can we do ni pa vu on this guy? So ni pa vu pa. Ni pa vu pa pa. All right. 24. Ni pa vu pa pa ni.
Oh, I'm 24.
Yeah, 24.
Sorry.
So, and then 25, and just to mix things up, I'm going to change the note. So, that'll be our ni, just to show you that I can. So, ni, that's our new ni. Forget what the old ni was, because it doesn't matter. We're in a new world. So, ni, so, ni, pa, vu, pa, vu, pa. All right. And the only thing I will leave you parting with, unless there are any questions, is the fact that when you're reading music, except for these exercise type things where there really is no rhythm, no meter, in general, Byzantine music is always duple meter. So that means that you have 2 beats to your measure. So 1, 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, like a march. So you have beat 1, 2, then you have beat 1, 2, and then you have beat 1, 2, and they're all separated. Sometimes by this little marker here, which is almost like a bar line in Western music, but it's just like a delineator between groups of 2. Every so often, you deviate from that because everything is based on words. Sometimes words don't make sense with duple meter. So then every so often you have an intervening measure or an intervening grouping of triple meter or quadruple meter. And that's where, like, let's say you're to go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. So these would intervene if you have something. So if you had like have mercy on me, O God, according to that have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that changes the rhythm there. So if you're looking at certain hymns, they will change rhythm every so often. But when in doubt, unless it says otherwise, if it says triple meter, which some things are, everything is always bugle meter. So it'd always be 1 2 1 2 1 2, except in a very rare cases, and they'll normally say so. And so that's in case you end up going beyond or looking at a piece of music and wondering how does this work, or why are these all bar lines, or why is this other stuff, before I actually get a chance to explain it. So that's everything for the moment. I don't know if there are any questions. If not, these are the little flashcards that I've been working on. So if anyone wants to see them, trying to figure out if they're useful and what's the best method of how they look. But otherwise, you're dismissed, and Christ is risen.
I learned it.
What?
Oh, okay.
Indeed.
I learned it